We have already learned inheritance in our last class. We looked at inheritance in detail. So let me give a very brief overview of inheritance. That is, we have a class person. We add some variables in the class person, say protected string name and protected string address. And we can also have some methods in your class. That is, let me have a public method here. So this method is just for displaying the person details, say display person. So this is what we are having here. And what I will do here is have a sysout statement, print address and name. This dot name and this dot address we'll have. Just a method here for printing name and address. Okay. So we have coded a person class. Now what is inheritance? There can be another class like student, which can actually inherit the person class. What do you mean by inheritance? Here you can reuse all these methods and data members that are protected and public in your class that inherits it. So how will you go with inheritance? Class student extends person. So when I say extends person, it is extending this class. Whatever that is protected and private there, I mean protected and public here will be extended in this class too. And I'll have a protected registration number here, protected string registration number. Okay. So even before coming into this class, let's take a look at some of the scenarios here. So what is our demonstration today is all about? Use of this, I mean super keyword in Java. What is the use of super keyword in Java? That is the objective. So first we'll start up with this. Say I have one super class. What is this? This is a super class, and class student extends person. This is a subclass. Now the objective is create an object of type student or create an object for subclass. How will you create an object of type student? Say new object. So you create an object of type subclass, student name Satish, and new student is created. And now if I want to display the name and address, how to display the name and address? We can have a constructor. So let me have a constructor here. In this constructor, let me initialize name and address to some default value. Say name, this dot name is equal to some default values we have here. This dot name is equal to test, and this dot address is equal to test. So let me again repeat what we have here. We have a class person, two variables, a constructor initializing these variables, a method to print the data in these variables. We have class student extending person. Now what we have done, we have created an object of type subclass, that is student, and we can very well call this method, right, because we are inheriting this method. So how will you call that method? It's Satish dot display person. So this is inheritance. So when I run this, you can very well see what's happening here. We have to understand this one. So what will be the output here? The output here will be test and test. So what is the flow here? When I create an object of type subclass, what is happening is first the constructor of the superclass is getting executed. So what is getting executed? First the constructor of the superclass is getting executed. First this will execute. This constructor in the superclass will execute. And what it will establish? Name and address to be test. Next, when you call display person, these values are getting displayed. So in an inheritance hierarchy, when you have a superclass and subclass, when you create an object for subclass, the constructor in the superclass will run first by default. You understood this? So what we understand here is when I create an object, what will run? Constructor in the superclass will execute. We'll go to scenario number 2. What is scenario number 2? We'll have a variable here, protected string. I'll have a registration number to be the variable for student. And the next thing is I'm going to have a constructor in the subclass too. So let me have a constructor in the subclass. So what will I do here is I will just initialize the constructor. I will initialize the registration number to this dot registration number to something like 123. Okay, and I'll have a method here, a public method here. What this method is, display student. And what I'm going to display here is just the registration number of the student I will display here. Let's make this public. I have made it private. Let's make this public. This out. We'll display the registration number of the student. This dot registration number. Fine. So what is scenario number 2? You have a constructor, default constructor in the subclass. You have a constructor in the base class. So what I will do is I will also have a sysout statement inside the constructors. That is constructor from base class. And I'll have a sysout statement in the constructor inside the subclass. So I'll have a sysout statement here. So this is constructor in the subclass, we'll say. Now we'll create an object for type subclass. We'll create an object of type student. We'll call these two methods. One is display person from the superclass and display student from the subclass. So we have already created an object. Now what we'll do is we'll call Satish dot display student. We'll take a look at this output, then you'll understand what's happening. So what is the order here? Constructor from the base class executes first. Next, the constructor from the subclass executes. Finally, the methods are getting called. So this is called the order of constructor calls in inheritance. So when you have several classes inheriting, like you have multi-level inheritance or single level inheritance like this, when you have a base class with some constructor, it will run first. Next, the constructor in the subclass will run. This order will be maintained even when you have multi-levels of inheritance. First the supermost class, next that in middle level class, and then the final subclass. But are you all clear with the order of constructor calls and inheritance? So let me again repeat this. We have a class person, two variables here. We have a constructor in the person class. We are initializing name and address to test. And we also have a method in the person class or the super class wherein we just display the name and address. This is fine, right? Next we have the student class. We are extending persons. We are extending person. So student is the subclass. And in the student class, we have this registration number to be the data member specific for a student. So we have put that here. And we have a constructor in the subclass too. So what this constructor does is initializes registration number to 123. And we have a method in the subclass which is used for printing the registration number. Now what I am doing, I am creating an object of type student. So when I create an object of type student, what will happen? First, the constructor in the base class will run initialize name and address to test. After that, the constructor in the subclass will run initialize registration number to 123. What I am calling next, I am calling display person. This will display name as test, address as test. And next I am calling display student. This will display registration number as 123. So you can very well see from the output which is running first, constructor from base class. Next, what is getting executed? Constructor in the subclass. Next, the methods printing name and address as test and test. Finally, the registration number is printed as 123. So this is the order of constructor calls. Are you all clear with this? The next question I have is, what if I have a parameterized constructor in the subclass alone? What is parameterized constructor in the subclass? Instead of initializing this to 1, 2, 3, I'm going to have a parameterized constructor like this. String registration number is equal to reg number. Can we create an object of type student now? So what you have to pass here? Registration number. Let me pass registration number as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like this. Now what is going to happen is when you create an object of type student, Constructor from which class will be executed first? Base class will get executed, initialize that to test and test. Next, constructor from subclass will execute, and then this is going to initialize registration number to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then when you call the methods, the appropriate output will be given. Are you all clear with this? How to have a parameterized constructor in the subclass? So now let me execute this code. Let's take a look at what's happening. What we see here, you can see here what is getting run: base class, subclass, test from the base class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from the subclass. So what is this scenario? You are having a parameterized constructor only in the subclass. So when you have a parameterized constructor in the subclass, you can very well initialize the variables pertaining to your subclass like this. Are you clear with this? Any doubts here? The next question is, what if you want to have a parameterized constructor in your superclass? Say, I don't want this to be initialized to some test and test by default. I want a parameterized constructor here. Then what will happen? String, say I'm just getting an input name, string and input address. And this will be passed to this dot name, and this will be passed to address. So now this scenario has changed. You have a parameterized constructor in the superclass. You also have a parameterized constructor in the subclass. So when you are creating an object of type student, what will happen? This constructor is going to run in the base class. When it runs, it will be looking in for some input parameters. But then those input parameters are not available, so it's going to throw you an error. Yeah, this place you're going to get an error. How to resolve this error? That is our next question. What all things I need here? I need input name and input address. So I'll pass input name and address here. Say input name is Satish. I'll pass that. And input address, we'll say it's Vellore. So while I'm creating the object, I'm passing all the parameters required for my classes. What are the parameters? You need name, you need address, and you need registration number. Now these things will be coming to which class? The student class, because this is where I'm creating the object. I'm creating an object for student. So you should receive all the parameters here. So you receive it as string. How will you receive? You string name, string address, string registration number. There's no other go. When you're creating this, you should receive all the parameters here. And then these parameters should be passed to which constructor? They should be passed to this constructor. So how you are going to pass that is, there's one more step. This is where you're going to use the super method. So you call super, that's a method, and then you pass name and registration number, address here. Name and address you pass. So what this super is going to do is, it's going to take this name and address, it's going to call the superclass constructor, pass this name here, pass this address here, so it's getting initialized. So what is the use of the super method here? It takes all the parameters that you pass in for that object. Whatever parameters should be passed to the base class constructor is passed using the super method. So this will in turn call your base class constructor, person constructor, pass name, address here. Satish will come here, Vellore will come here, so it will initialize. And there's one more important thing. This should be the first step within your constructor. The super method should be the very first step within your constructor. You can't follow the super method after your sysout statement. These are certain rules we have to follow. Now let us run this. Let's check what happens. So what is that happening? Constructor from the base class is run, and how it is being run? Because this one passes name and address to your base class constructor, initializes name and address to Satish and Vellore. Next, constructor from the subclass runs and initializes registration number to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Finally, when you call display person, this dot name will be Satish, this dot address will be Vellore, and finally this dot registration number is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the use of the super method within a constructor. So in Eclipse, while you generate constructors by default, you would have seen super method getting added to the first line of your constructors. So very, very important. when you are working with parameterized constructors in multi-level inheritance or even in single level inheritance, when your base class is having a parameterized constructor, you should definitely pass the values using the super keyword. I'll give you one exercise now. Say there is class BTech student extending student. Class BTech student extend student. And now you have some variable specific for a BTech student. Credit requirements, you have a variable int credit requirements for BTech student. Now you create an object of type BTech student. You carry out this exercise. You have a class BTech student extending student. You create an object of type BTech student. What will be the variable inside the BTech student class? Credit requirement. So you have a parameterized constructor in your BTech student class. You have a parameterized constructor in your student class. You have a parameterized constructor in your person class. So you now create an object of type BTech student, and then you call all the methods: display student, display person, display BTech student. I will also code this. Those who are not clear with things can take a look at this. So now I will have class BTech student extends student. What is the variable here? We can have protected string. Say credit requirements, I will say it can be an integer. Okay. I'll have a parameterized constructor here, that is so what we are going to get in here, we are going to get this int credit requirements. And what we'll do here is initialize this like this. This dot credit requirements is equal to credit requirements. So we have parameterized constructor in our subclass 2 here. Now what is our objective? You have a display BTech student method. Let me create this display BTech student method public. So this is display BTech student. And what we'll display here, just the credit requirements will display. We'll say this dot credit requirements. Okay. But when we create an object of type BTech student, what will happen? Which constructor will run first? Constructor from the person class will run. Then constructor from the student class will run. Then finally constructor from the BTech student class will run. So now what we'll do is we'll create an object of type BTech student. So let me create an object of type BTech student. Let me delete all these things. Let's start off fresh. So creating an object of type BTech student, it's BTech student. So Satish is the student, and here what parameters you are going to pass? We'll pass the credit requirements that is required. Say 160 credits is required for a BTech student. It's an integer value, but we should not stop here. We should also pass the name and address required for a person class. We should pass the registration number required for a student class. Only then our code will be complete. So how will you pass that? Say I'll pass. Let me reduce the font size a little. Let me pass name, address, and what else? Registration number also we should pass. Let's say 12 BCE student, something like that. And credit requirements is 160. We should also receive those parameters here. How will you receive those parameters here? String name, string address, string registration number. See, everything you have to receive here, and in credit requirements you receive everything. And what should be the first statement in your parameterized constructor? It should be super, and then you have to pass name comma address comma registration number. That's it. All your errors are now rectified. So what will happen? Super name address registration number will be calling which constructor? This is going to call this parameterized constructor in your student class. and this in turn will pass name and address to the parameterized constructor in your person class. So here name will be Satish, address will be Vellore. After this, in the student class, registration number will be 12 BCE. Finally, in the credit requirements will be 160. So now what we'll do is we'll pass everything, and then we'll call all the methods here. BTech student, it's Satish dot display person. So this is from the person class, Satish dot display student. This is from the student class, Satish dot display BTech student from the lowermost class here. Let's run this. So constructor from the base class, subclass runs. We can also have another sysout statement inside BTech constructor, but anyway. So Satish value 12 BCE 160. Say, let me again repeat this. Very simple. You have a person class, some variables, some parameterized constructor here to initialize name and address. You have a student class extending person. And inside the student class also you have one variable registration number. You have a parameterized constructor initializing registration number. Next you have BTech student extending student, and for a BTech student we have a specific attribute credit requirements, and here we have a constructor in the BTech student class. So when you are creating a constructor for this class, what all things you have to get as parameters? When it is a parameterized constructor, you have to get name and address which is required for the person class. You should get in registration number which is required for the student class. Finally, credit requirements which is required for your BTech class. And how will you pass all these data to your super classes? The very first statement should be super. How will you pass name, address, registration number? So this is going to invoke your superclass constructor, and this will again pass to its superclass. So you're going to have name and address initialized here, next registration number initialized here, finally credit requirements initialized. When you invoke the appropriate methods, what is going to happen? You're going to get the desired output. So this is called order of constructor calls in inheritance, and that's how you use the super method within the constructors. Next, there's one more use of super keyword, that is super keyword can be used for directly accessing superclass methods. I just write it here. From your subclass, using super keyword, you can access the superclass methods. I'll tell you how this happens. For instance, here, what I am doing is I am printing BTech students data. But then I want to print the name, address. I want to also print the registration number. Where these things are printed, display student prints the registration number, display person prints the name and address. Say if I want to call these methods in my subclass directly, I can do that. I'll show you how to perform that. See, you just use the super keyword dot display person. I'm calling this super dot display person. It means I'm invoking the method from the superclass. Likewise, super dot display student. So this is going to invoke the method in the superclass. This will again invoke the method in the superclass. Now I have changed this like this. Now what I can do is I can very well create an object for my subclass, delete these things. I will still get the same output because from within this subclass method, I have invoked the methods of the superclass. How did I invoke that? Super dot method name. So let's execute this. Let's check. So you see now we are getting the same output, but how did we get this output? Super dot display person, super dot display student. This is printing the registration number within the method. So super keyword can also be used for accessing the methods in your superclass directly. Super keyword can also be used for accessing the data members from your superclass. So you can also use it for accessing, can be used for accessing data members from your superclass. What are the data members in your superclass? Protected string name and protected string address. And you also have student, which is a superclass. You're going to have registration number here. So what you can do here is you can very well, instead of calling the methods, I can directly access like this sysout super dot name. I can access name, sysout super dot address I can access, sysout super dot registration number. So you can also access the data members of your super class using the super keyword super dot variable name. Let's run this. Let's check what is the output. So you're going to get a similar kind of an output. You see super dot name, super dot address, super dot registration number, this dot credit requirements. So when somebody asks you what is the use of super keyword, it's used within the constructors to invoke or pass parameters to the base class constructors. So you can invoke the base class constructors using the super keyword, and you can also access the data members in the base class or the super class using the super keyword. You can also access the methods in the superclass using the super keyword. See, one question was raised by one of my friends here. So he was asking, can we have any other statements before this? Say, like I told you, within the constructor, super should be the first statement. Say I am accessing super dot display person. Can I have any other statements within a method, within an ordinary method? Can I have any other statements? Will it give me an error? I'll just check this. This is a dummy statement. So is it giving me an error here? It's not giving me an error. Let me check the entire code. It's not giving me an error. Say we can have other statements preceding your super statement in a method, but within a constructor, say inside this constructor, I can't have a sysout statement preceding my super statement. Immediately an error pops out. You see, this is a dummy statement. Immediately you're going to get an error because that is not allowed. What is the first statement? That is the super method should be called within your constructor if you're passing the parameters to your base class. So this demo alone I will show from the morning class. What is that? Having the same variable in the base class and in the subclass. So let me create that class person. I have this variable protected variable. I'll say protected string name, and let me have a constructor here. That is this constructor. What we are going to do is we'll just initialize this dot name to be some name. Say I'll call this name to be person test, and we'll have a method in the base class that is a public method display person. So what we'll do is we'll display this name, that is this dot name. Very simple class with a simple method here. We'll have another class inheriting this class student. How it inherits extends person, and then what we'll do here is we'll have the same variable data member in this class too. So this is string name. We'll have again string name here, protected string name, and we'll have a constructor in the subclass too. And what we'll do here is we'll initialize this name to say this dot name to something called student name. Both the superclass and subclass has the same variables here. And we'll also display the subclass variable name also. So we'll have this public method here, public method that is display student, and what we'll do is we'll display this name. Now we'll create an object of type student. How will you create an object of type student? Let me create this object of type student. I'll call student, always I'll use my name here, Satish dot display person. When I say Satish dot display person and I call Satish dot display student. So two methods I'm calling. The first method will be printing this dot name. So what will be the value? Person test will be printed. When I call Satish dot display student, this dot name will print student name. So though you have the same variables in the base class and in the subclass, the initialization happens differently. I mean they are different. They are treated different. So let me run this code. You'll be able to see these two variables holding two different values. Let's so first is person test, that is this dot name from the person class. Next is student name, that is this dot name from the student class. So you can What you understand from this, you can have the same variables even in both the superclass and the subclass. Say if I want to access this dot name, I mean, if I want to access the superclass name in my subclass, how will I access that? Here I want to print person student. How to access that? Super dot name. So here, say inside person, I want to just access, or not here, I'm sorry. So from within the student subclass, I have this display student. From within here, if I perform this super.name, actually what will be printed? That will be printing person test. Super.name is person test. This dot name is student name. So what we'll do is we'll just call display student and then we'll run this.